All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Tim and Tim Show, making moves in multifamily live. This week, we're talking about eating elephant. I hope you got quite the appetite. Tim, how you
Ooh, I
doing
like
today,
what you
man?
did there. I am I'm doing well. What
Can't
do I
complain.
usually say? Can't complain. Um, I try all the time, and my wife tells me just shut the hell up.
Yeah, I can't complain, but nobody's going to listen.
um,
Um, all right. So today we're talking about how to eat the elephant. we, we've had a lot of conversations with people lately, and they kind of look at your end result, and they look at your end result and say, I cannot achieve that. But really, you can't be paying attention to somebody else's current status,
no,
because if that's your end result goal, it doesn't mean you're going to get there in one step. And there's a quote that resonated, not Dennis Russell, but Dennis Polson. We were talking about this in our Making Moves group last week, and this is kind of what spurred this a little bit. But it was it continuous improvement is better than delayed perfection. And I think a lot of people get stuck in that delayed perfection category because they want to analyze the situation, they want to make one decision and get it right,
yeah,
and go off to eating the whole elephant in one bite. But it never ever ever works that way. It is always a series of continuous small improvements, day after day after day after day, for a very long period of time, that gets you to the end goal that you're trying to accomplish.
yeah.
How do you feel about that, Tim?
No, I completely agree with it. And it's one of the things. Quite frankly, it's one of the things that I learned doing technology because we would sit in rooms and try to design like the perfect system all the time, and then finally one day, like this guy way smarter than any of us walks in and he's just like, guys, like we could sit here all day and you just don't know what the perfect system is until you put something out there. And he's like, and that's where the whole in technology it's called MVP, your minimal viable product, right?
Hmm.
And so it's like, let's figure out what the three things are we know we need to go with and put it out there and let's go. And I've carried that similar concept over. It's like, hey, maybe I want to buy 10,000 units of real estate, of multifamily properties, but I'm not probably not going to go buy 10,000 at one time, right? And by the way, that would probably just be dumb. Go
You might
from
as well
zero to
own the whole city.
10,000. Yeah, go from zero to 10,000 under management in a week, right? Like,
It's all right. Just give it just third party manager. That's okay.
yeah,
um,
that sounds like a way to lose your shirt real fast.
so I know that we kind of relate everything back to real estate, and how acquiring multifamily units and things like that, it's important. But I also want to kind of bring this into relevance of how it's not just in big goals,
No,
right? You have to eat the elephant one bite at a time with any new thing that you're trying to accomplish in your life, whether it's working out at the gym, or new systems and processes in your business, or trying to achieve your your 10-year goal, right? Like, all of it comes in incremental progress. And I fell victim to this, trying to eat the elephant at one bite, and this derailed me for 2 days. I mean, it was like split between 2 different days, but it was, probably 4 to 5 hours of work of just kind of like thinking and trying and experimenting and doing this and doing that. We recently rolled out a scorecard in our company. Those of you that use EOS understand the employee scorecard, trying to make it a competitive game for your employees to accomplish the 2 things that are most important, 2 or 3, or I mean, I guess up to 5 things that are the most important things to you. And as I'm sitting there, there's just so many different possibilities and probabilities of things that could change. Well, what if this happens? What if that happens? How this it doesn't work because of this? And you sit there and you go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And really, Tim and I and Crystal had a conversation. It was like, okay, just roll out something this week so that there's something on the table. And if it doesn't work, then next week we can get feedback from everybody. And if it doesn't work, we can make changes and improvements. And eventually we will have a product that doesn't need to be changed anymore. I know in the software world, that really never happens. I mean, you're constantly doing improvements and
oh
upgrades
yeah,
and integrations and stuff for forever. But when you're talking about like an SOP or a process within your business, that accomplishes a goal, you come to a point where you probably don't really need to edit it too much further past a certain point where it just starts to work in the intention that you want it to. But I fell
Right.
victim to trying to eat the elephant at the whole time, and I'm sitting here like racking my brain about, oh my god, how am I going to do this right the first time? And it didn't really matter about getting it right the first time because we pushed it out, and then literally the next day I had more changes. I had, hell, just as recently as yesterday, I was tinkering with it a little bit, trying to make improvements to make it more visually appealing, but also like easier to read. And I could have never gotten that if I didn't like push it out and then come back and kind of reassess it.
Yeah. And guys, I mean, similar concept, right? Tim's talking, he applied it to a scorecard. I've had conversations with guys at these conferences that we go to, and you're sitting there and, it's like, what's your goal? And, everybody throws out the unit goal or whatever. But one person said,
$10,000 a month.
yeah, well, and one person said, I want to make $10,000 a month, right? I want to get to 10,000 a month. And they were like, I just don't know how, right? I'm like, and I just looked at him. I was like, go find a property that'll pay you $1,000 a month. And he was like, but I want to make 10,000 a month. And I'm like, so do you have the wherewithal to buy a single property that's going to spit off $10,000 a month in profit to you? And he was like, well, no. And I'm like, all right, so go find one that'll do 1,000.
Right.
And then do another one, and then do another one. And, I'm like, eventually you'll be there. And, it's crazy when, people sit there and they get frozen in that big number, right? That big goal or whatever. And it's like, okay, just do this one little thing, do this one little thing. When I first started, I knew I needed to create a social media following or a social media presence, if you will. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, how am I going to be Kim Kardashian, right? Like that kind of thing. How am I going to get 1 million followers? Well, hey guys, guess what? I still don't to this day have 1 million followers. But at the end of the day, I was talking to Mike, and Mike's like, just go post. He goes, just go do a post. I was like, oh, I can do that. So I went out and I did a post, and I forgot, it was something stupid. I mean, but it was a post, right? And the next day I did another post, and the next day I did another post. And fast forward 6 months, after 6 months of posting every day, I think my LinkedIn was up to, like 5 or 6,000, connections or whatever. I had started with like 130, but it was one of those things where I'm like, 6 months after just doing something each day that took me like 5 minutes each day, I look back on it and I'm like, man, I went from this to 5,000. I'm like, I can keep doing this, right?
Right.
But if I had looked at like, how do I get to 5,000 followers, I would, I don't know how to do that. You just got to break it down and create these little small steps that creates momentum, right? And don't get me wrong, the first couple of days, it was a total pain in the ass just because I wasn't used to doing it. But pretty soon it just became part of my regular daily routine. And like I carried that forward 2 weeks ago. One of our students showed up and was like, I want to have a LinkedIn presence like you have. And I'm like, okay, well, what are you going to do this week to make that happen? And she's like, I don't know. I was like, how many days this week do you feel like you can post? And she's like, I'll commit to 3. And I'm like, okay, go do 3 days, and she comes back the next week. She's like, I did my 3 days. And I'm like, okay, cool. This week, can you do 4?
Well, I always like the maybe it's not an analogy, but it's kind of like an expression of, there's nobody that's better than you in anything in life, really. It's just they've been doing it longer, they've been doing it for a longer period of time with more frequency, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's not that you couldn't be fit and at the gym, right? And like, some of the supermodels, right? But they've been going to the gym for 15 years, for 5 days a week, for 15 years, right? They're doing the boring, consistent actions, right? They're pulling the levers to get to their end goal. And it's the same, I don't want to say it's the same daily routine, but it's more or less a routine of something that a repeatable task that you just do for a very long period of time that builds up that muscle of becoming an expert at it. Like I like to think about that example of when you were with Peyton at the soccer game, and they were doing, the normal, like the professionals were doing, the little league. I don't even know what they call soccer, but the little league exercises, right? Of like, the passing the ball drills and this, that, and the other thing. It's doing the fundamental exercises day after day after day after day for a very long period of time. That's what makes somebody better at something than what you are good at, right? Because you
Yeah.
maybe have spent your time doing with that time and attention and focus on something else, like playing the guitar, or somebody's playing soccer or football or whatever. Insert literally any activity, and you can have the same result if you do the same boring activities over and over and over and over and over again for a long period of time.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. You're talking about the soccer thing. Same thing in football. Like I'll go to football games, and college guys, pros, whatever. You go and watch them warm up, and you'll see the offensive linemen doing the same pregame drills that we were doing in Pee Wee in middle school. It's get down in a stance, take a step, put your hands up, right? And it's like they've
Muscle
been doing
memory.
that. They've been doing that for 20 years. And it's same thing with free throws. Like, it's like you see these pros and they can step up and close their eyes and shoot a free throw. You know why? Because they still shoot 100 free throws a day, and they've been doing it for 20 years.
Right.
But they
Yeah.
didn't,
Right.
yeah, but they didn't start. They didn't start that way, right? Like they just started practicing free throws, and the
Right.
next thing you know, it's like, man, I can hit 90% of my free throws. I can do it with my eyes closed. But it starts. It's creating that muscle memory. It's creating that momentum, right?
Right.
Um,
And that's the same mindset that we've taken to apply against our real estate portfolio. And that's how we've gotten to where we've gotten today. Right. And it's not
yeah,
that we went from 0 units to 2,000 in a day. I mean, this is multiple years of work. I mean, multiple years of building the foundation before you even get to your first deal, right?
right.
The investor network, building up the relationships, which include broker relationships, investor relationships, peer relationships, right? With people that can help you in your business, like, surrounding yourself with people that are doing what you want to be doing and becoming friends with them, right? That's your new norm. And then your new norm is exactly that. You're doing the same exercises on a day-to-day activity. So, like, what does that look like for Tim and I? It looks like talking to the brokers that bring us deals, texting them. I mean, sure, at first it was like a, hey, I'm looking for deals type of thing, but now we just text because we enjoy talking to each other.
Yeah,
And same thing with investors, right? Constantly talking with investors, seeing how their families are going, seeing how, talking about the investments that they're in, how they're performing well, how they're performing badly. You just continue to build a relationship with them by, with honesty and transparency and communication, really, on a day-to-day basis, and underwriting deals and talking to investors, and understanding the market and paying attention to what the Fed is doing, and paying attention to the weekly emails that you get from the broker, the lending brokers, of what interest rates are doing. Like, staying on top of that every single week is our doing your Pee Wee drills, right? It's
yeah,
those are the fundamentals that are going to grow your business, are deals and money, right? So anything that's building a relationship with somebody that is, or a skill set that's going to bring you a deal, or building a skill set or a relationship with somebody that's going to invest money with you, if you don't have your own, right?
right.
Those are the basic economics of it, right? That's all you have to do on a long-term basis every single day. Maybe not, you don't have to do it on Saturdays and Sundays, but you understand the principle we're trying to get across is like,
Yeah,
that is what you do on a day-to-day basis. And that's what builds your brand, your reputation, the relationships you have with everybody that you need to be successful in business. Because it's not a single person sport. It is a team sport. There's a lot of people that you need to involve, from insurance and lending and, property management. And I mean, KPs, capital raisers, like, bridge funding, whatever. I mean, there's so many people out there that you need to build relationships with to continue to excel and push your business forward. And without those types of relationships, you're just not going to see the progress that you want. And on an incremental basis, day after day after day, it might feel like you're not doing anything. But you look back 3, 5, 6 years, and you're like, oh, I can clearly see the steps that I took on a day-to-day basis to get me to where I am today. And going through it, like when you're trying to instill something or change something or do something new, the first couple of months are going to be difficult because it's out of your norm. It's going
yeah,
to take willpower, like mental willpower, physical willpower. like, kind of getting outside of your comfort zone and doing all those buzzword things that really get it into building it, getting it to be like your day-to-day life, where it's just like, this is
Right.
ingrained into everything that I do, then it's not even work anymore because it's just who I am.
Yeah, I mean, and it becomes second nature, right? I mean,
Second nature. Yeah,
one of
that's
the
what you say.
one of the one of the guys recently was asking me. He was like, "Hey, how do you guys look at so many deals? Like, how do you look at so many deals? How do you know what not to look at?" And I'm like, "Because we did a lot of underwriting." And they're like, "Yeah, but how did you get good at underwriting?" I was like, "I just told you, we did a lot of
Did a lot of
underwriting."
underwriting.
And and when I first started, I would have to sit down and underwrite everything all the way through to figure out if it was a deal or not, right?
Right.
And now after, I don't know, 200 underwriting, 300, 400, whatever it's been, you start to figure out, like, hey, if these three things don't work, it's probably not a deal. So
Mhm.
you start to look at those three things very quickly. It's, some people call it back of the napkin, some people can do it in their head. um Mike Ely, I'll give him credit. Mike's like really, really phenomenal at, like, you tell him a couple of like basic things, he's like, probably not a deal, right? Like,
Mhm.
the only way you get good at that is to, like, underwrite, to practice underwriting, to
Mhm.
constantly underwrite. And it's there's no secret. And one of the things that I decided when I first started was, like, every day I'm going to underwrite 3 deals,
Mhm.
even if I think they suck. I'm going to underwrite 3 deals. And so when I first started, my first goal was post every day, right? So I got that became second nature to me. And then I was like, I'm going to call 3 brokers a day. I would call 3 brokers a day. And then after I got that down and that became second nature, I'm going to underwrite 3 deals a day. Right. And I got that. But you see, it wasn't, let me go close on 1,000 units. It was, let me do this. Let me do this. Let me do this. And I tell you what, even today, there's some pieces of that I still do every single day. Like, I still post every day. I still contact a broker or a new broker every single day. And I'm still doing at least back of the napkin underwriting almost every single day.
But it's important to mention that I personally think that it's important to take those steps in that order, right? Because one, you have to build your social media presence if you're going to start attracting people to you to invest, right? That's the hardest part of this whole thing, I think, is building the relationships where people are going to trust you to send you $100,000 wire, right?
Yeah, I agree.
So start with that first, right? You got to dig your well before you need to drink, uh, in the water being your investor capital, right? Then the second lead indicator is, okay, well, I'm going to learn how to underwrite, which you can do in your own time as you're doing your social media postings. You don't even have to talk to anybody to get started, right? So now, after maybe a month or two, and you've kind of built up some momentum, you feel more comfortable writing social media posts and engaging online. And you've done some classes and watched some YouTube, and you've done all the free things that you kind of have an understanding of the lingo and the terminology. You have the basics down, right? So then the next thing that Tim did was start calling brokers, right? It's like, okay, what happens when you call brokers? Brokers give you deals, right? So inevitably, what happens when you start calling brokers and they send you deals to underwrite, you inevitably will start underwriting 3 deals a day. Because if each one of those brokers sends you one deal, boom, there's your 3 deals. But the
Right.
key here is, don't just take those deals and underwrite them just to underwrite them. You have to analyze the information.
Right.
What makes it a deal? What doesn't make it a deal? What do you like
Right.
about it? What do you not like about it? What about its location? You know, all of those different things. Like, what does this need to happen? What needs to happen in order for this to be a yes for you? And then go take that information, call the broker back, right? Which, inevitably closes the loop, because now you're doing okay, I got to talk to 3 brokers today. It could be the same broker again, right?
Yeah.
So it closes the loop of, I talked to the broker, I underwrote the deal, I understand what a deal looks like. Now I'm calling the broker back, and that's continuing to build the relationship with the broker, with your underwritten file, so that they know that you've actually taken the time to look at the deal and provide them feedback of what's a deal for you versus what's not a deal for you. Because what could be a deal for Tim and I might not be a deal for you, right? There's a reason why people do joint ventures versus syndications, because it's, can be significantly easier to get a joint venture numbers to pencil, versus a syndication, right? Just thinking about the equity splits and the return expectations and things like that, right? Or, whatever. We could do a whole show on all of that kind of stuff. But those 3 steps right there, building social media following, reaching out to brokers, underwriting deals, those 3 things are what's going to get you to start building that momentum to be able to get into this industry.
Hey, and by the way, guys, like, there's no better time than right now. Like, seriously, right now. And I'm not kidding. I'm not saying, the whole start today, otherwise you'll be a year older when you do, that kind of thing. No, like, literally, this is a great time to be doing it. Because I can tell you, when one of the times during the time I was trying to build my broker network, everybody and their sister was calling brokers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the real estate market was screaming, it was hot. Well, right now, I mean, most brokers will tell you their investor network, their buyer seller network of people doing deals is much smaller at the moment.
Transactional volume is down substantially.
They will take the call right now. Just to give you an example, like, brokers that wouldn't give me the time of day when I first started, they're reaching out to me. I haven't talked to them in 3 years. They're reaching out to me now. And so, hey, if there's a time to be doing this, like, this is a really good time. And like Tim said, dig that well before you need it. Well, if you get in there, you get your name known now, when the market picks back up, which it will, you've already got your foot in the door. So
there's never a bad time to get in, right?
No.
Because there's so much that takes time to develop and learn before you'll actually find success, that yes, the longer you push it off, you inevitably are going to take longer to get in, right? Look, Kim Block even saying, I've got brokers calling me too. I mean, it's just the state of the market right now, where it's a buyer's market, not a seller's market. As Tim and I are sellers in this market because we love buying and selling stuff. How are we making deals? We're doing a lot of seller financing now. And it's kind of a buzzword. When we first got started, when the real estate market's hot, nobody's entertaining seller financing. Nobody, right? But now's a great time for somebody to get into the industry, because, maybe you got a little bit of cash and you want to get into some larger stuff. There's some sellers out there that are more than happy to take some seller financing, and make the deal more attractive for you. And it's less kind of like looked down upon if you kind of ask, like, is the seller talking about any seller financing offers, because it's been so common in today's market. And when you approach it that way with the broker's like, yeah, you're right. Actually, a lot of people are doing seller financing right now. So it's a little bit less of a dirty word when you ask about seller financing in today's market versus, 3-4 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, a couple of things.
4 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, really good point, Tim, too, by the way, because I can think off the top of my head of eight deals going on right now that involved or are open to some level of seller financing, just off the top of my head. And then the other piece that I would say to that too is loan assumptions are more attractive now. I mean, because it used to be like, when the market was so hot, I mean, there were deals out there that were loan assumption deals, but they made no sense. They made no sense. The equity slice was way too big. You could still go get debt at 3.5%, 4%. So if somebody had a 3.25% loan, it's like, who cares? I can go get 4%. And I don't have to bring you 50% of the total cost in the down payment. So, now it's like, hey, if I got to bring you 30, 35, 40%, that's fine, because you got 3.5% debt, and the best I can get 6.5 or 7. So they start to make sense. And my point to that is like, loan assumptions make it easier in some cases to do deals, right?
It makes it easier for the seller to offer seller financing, right? Because if you look at the blended cost of capital between your primary loan and your secondary loan, right, or seller finance position, your blended cost of capital, even with a seller finance 7, 8, 9, 10% position, is still going to be better than what you can get for agency rates. And that's how you get your leverage up, right? So if you got a 50% note and you got the seller to hold back, an additional amount, that's how you get back to that, kind of, 20% down or so.
And what we mentioned about transaction volumes down, like, there's guys who want to sell right now. They don't have anywhere to put the capital. So they're like, let me just leave it here with you, and you pay me 7%, 8%, whatever.
Hmm.
and and I'm good with that because I don't have
Yep.
anywhere to put it anyway. So
Yep. Yeah, when there's opportunity to kind of grow it substantially, people want the cash. But
yeah,
when everything's kind of down and kind of slow, people are more willing to kind of have a conversation with you and say, you know what, I will kind of just park this for the next couple of years. And, when the market picks back up in 2, 3 years, I'll have cash again. And then, that'll work out good for me. And I have my money somewhere for the next couple of years.
we've kind of jumped into this territory. We were talking about like one bite at a time. Don't try to eat the whole elephant, but we've kind of like run into this little territory here where we're talking about an additional benefit of that. Like
Hmm.
as you're creating this muscle memory, as you're creating this momentum, doing small steps, you position yourself such that you're already doing it. You're sitting there ready when an opportunity like this presents itself, right? Like
Yeah.
if you're constantly waiting, you're like, oh, the market's not right. I don't know how to start, whatever. Then you're always sitting there, never prepared. But at least if you're doing, no matter how small it is, at least if you're doing something, you've got your foot in the door and you're ready to pounce, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I don't think we stress it enough. I mean, it took me 3 years to get into my first deal.
Yeah.
And it's like, if I had waited 3 years to get into my first deal, that was 3 years ago. Right. So I would have just been quitting my W 2 job. I would have just been starting all of these things. I'm not to say that it's not a good time or a bad time, but it just goes to show like there's a lot of legwork that has to take place before you get any tip of the iceberg success, where you have to do the work, the late nights, early mornings, weekends, whatever you have to do in order to sacrifice to make it happen. There's a lot of legwork that has to go into it first before you can, start taking down big deals. And I'm not to say that, everyone's mileage may vary, right? So, like, some people have it a little bit easier to get into the industry, some people a little bit more difficult. But no, the difference between the two people are the ones that quit fail, and
Yeah.
those that don't quit never fail, right?
Right.
So you just have to keep your feet moving forward, one bite at a time, one step at a time, one relationship at a time, underwriting one deal at a time, making one offer at a time, continually learning, reading the books like I got on my shelf back there of how to do creative financing, of how to like better increase your negotiation tactics, and understanding real estate as a whole, the industry, everything. There's so much that goes into this entire industry that it's unreasonable to think that you could learn it all in a couple of months and then become successful. It just won't happen.
Yeah. And guys, listen, just as we're closing this out, like please, there's always going to be a reason. There's always, if you look, there's always going to be a reason not to, right? So, before November 5th, everybody was like, well, we got this election. I want to see the outcome of the election, right? Well, now we know the outcome of the election. And now I hear people talking about, oh, Trump's got these things he's going to do. I'm not sure how that's going to affect the market. I'm going to wait
I'm
and
going to
see,
wait and see.
right? Yeah, it's like, you know what? But here's the thing: no matter no matter who the president is, no matter when the next election is, no matter what interest rates do, no matter what inflation does, no matter what the economy does, you can post on social media, you can call brokers, and you can underwrite deals, right?
Hmm.
So you can flex those muscles, you can build that momentum so that whenever the right time is for you, you're ready to go. And then, by the way, as you're doing that, you're going to find out and you're going to see this. You're going to go, oh, wait a minute. I got a deal that works at 7.5% interest. Let me go
Yeah.
do this. Right. So
Hmm.
you start to realize like, hey, if I can make it work in this market, I can make it work in any market. And you're more
Yep.
comfortable with doing a deal. So don't wait, go do something. Go do something small today that you can manage and do it again tomorrow. And let's
Yep.
just
I
see how
mean,
it goes.
yeah, deals have been being done during up markets and down markets. If you can underwrite a deal to work in what you have at hand, then do it, right?
Yeah.
Um, there will always be deals being done. Always. There will always be somebody that needs to sell. There was always going to be somebody that wants to buy. And it doesn't matter where you are at the cycle in the market. If your numbers work and you're happy with it, just take action and go do it. And then
Yeah.
you can figure out the rest as time goes on, because the most forgiving thing in real estate is if you have time on your side. So, make sure that you keep that in mind, and always analyze what you have at hand, and just make a decision and move forward with it.
Yeah.
Don't
Hey
get
guys,
stuck.
Yeah, agreed. And one thing, like we were talking about sports analogies. I'm going to give you a personal experience here. So when I used to do Ironmans and triathlons and marathons and stuff like that, every once in a while on the run, I would get very yeah, I'd be struggling, right? And in my head, I'm like, I'm done. I'm going to quit. And before I would do that, I would be like, okay, you see that light post up there? I'm going to run to that light post. And I would run to that light post. And I'd be like, okay, now you see that mailbox? I'm going to run to that mailbox. Okay, you see that next light post? I'm going to run to that light post. And I don't know, like next thing you know, 50 light posts and 30 mailboxes later, I was done. I had finished the marathon. But I didn't do it 26.2 miles at a time. I did it a lamp post and a mailbox at a time. And the next thing you know, I'm done. Same thing here, guys. Just pick something small, go get it. And the next thing you know, you'll have 1,000 units. So
Yeah. Looking back in hindsight is always more substantial than looking forward. Like, looking 5 years into the future feels like forever, like an eternity, right? But looking 5 years into the past, you're like, oh my God, that flew by, right? So like, why don't you, instead of look at 5 years into the future, just look 90 days into the future, right? Separate your goals into 90-day chunks and do those little sprints in order to start making progress and take action every single day. Just take action.
every day.
And then before you know it, a couple of years have gone by of you taking action and you're like, wow, those two knuckleheads knew what they were talking about. So,
I have my
all right.
moments.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. See you next week. Peace.
See you guys.